Hello everyone, welcome to sqadia.com. Our topic for today's lecture is lab diagnosis of viruses. And in this section, we'll be covering the microscopic and serologic methods. So we'll start by explaining the microscopic identification. We'll see how we can actually visualize the virus present inside a cell through microscopy. And then we'll discuss certain serologic procedures and why they are the most favored or most suited to identify a type of virus inside a cell. And then we'll explain the IgM antibody test and for what type of viruses it is used. So viruses can be detected and identified by direct microscopic examination. There are three different procedures that can be used to detect the presence of viruses inside the cell. The first one is the use of light microscopy. It can reveal characteristics like inclusion bodies or multinucleated giant cells. So we know that there are certain viruses which, when entered inside the cell, will remain inside the cell in small packets known as inclusion bodies, which can be visualized under the light microscope, which will not show the presence of virus. Rather, the inclusion bodies can be visualized inside those cells, and we can actually detect the presence of virus in those cells. Similarly, the presence of multinucleated giant cells can also show or can also help us identify a virus infection inside the cell. We know that viruses cause different types of cytopathic effects inside the cell, and one of those is the formation of multinucleated giant cells. And so this is a characteristic feature of viral infection, and we can visualize it under the light microscope, and we can actually detect presence of viruses in the cell. Then, for example, in case of herpesvirus-induced multinucleated giant cells, there is a Zank's smear, and this smear basically shows the presence of herpes virus in vesicular skin lesions, because again, herpes virus is known to cause or induce giant cell formation. And if we take the vesicular skin lesion samples, then we can actually visualize those multinucleated giant cell, which are herpes virus characteristic giant cells, or the Zank's smear. And this smear can help us identify the presence of herpes virus in a particular sample. Then we have ultraviolet microscopy, also known as the UV microscopy. It is used when we have a fluorescent antibody, and this antibody is directly staining the virus inside the infected cell. As I've explained earlier, if we have an antibody which is particularly specific or homologous to the virus that might have infected a particular cell, then by adding those antibodies in that sample, we can detect the signal, the fluorescent signal that is given out once the antibody antigen complex is formed. The antibody is usually bound with a fluorescent signal like the green fluorescent protein, and that signal can be detected under the UV microscopy, and we can identify or detect the presence of virus in a particular sample. Then we have electron microscopy. Since electron microscopy has more resolution as compared to the light and ultraviolet microscopy, we can actually detect the presence of virus particles, and we can characterize them with the help of electron microscopy by their size and their morphology. So electron microscopy gives us a more visual and a more clear perspective of whether or not a virus is present inside the cell, and we can actually identify the type of virus by its morphology, by its size, comparing its size to the cell, and we can even detect the number of the virus, or we can detect the stage by seeing if the virus is actively multiplying inside the cell. So as you can see here, this is basically the ultraviolet signal that is being given out by a virus that has a fluorescent tag to it, and we can see that there are smears that are being formed, and that can be characteristic of a particular type of viral infection. This is just an overview of how we can visualize the presence of an infection inside a cell through different types of microscopy. This is just a comparison of light microscopy with transmission electron microscopy, that also called as STEM, and scanning electron microscopy, or SEM. We know that in case of light electron microscopy, the source is basically a light source or a lamp, and in the case of electron microscopy, we have an electron source. In both of these, the condenser lens basically help the source pass through the particular specimen that we need to visualize, and then we can see or detect the presence or absence of virus inside the cell. This is the image that can be directly viewed under the light microscopy. This is the image that can be viewed on a fluorescent screen with the help of a transmission electron microscopy. And this is the 3D image that can be formed by using a scanning electron microscope. You can see that we can actually identify the size of the virus and also the morphology of the virus that has infected a particular cell. And thus electron microscopy is more specific, with a better resolution, and gives us a better idea of the type of virus that has infected a cell. Then we have serologic procedures. Rise in the titer of antibodies to a virus can be used to diagnose a current infection. We know that if a virus is present inside the cell, then antibodies are going to start forming inside the cell, and the titer of those antibodies will increase definitely because of an ongoing infection inside the cell, and that's your body's way to fight against that virus. And so those antibodies can be detected and can help us quantify as well help us stage the infection or the current and ongoing infection. Seroconversion is a phenomena or term which is used to describe the finding of antibodies, and we can compare it with to the presence of virus in a patient's serum. Seroconversion basically is the point before which the virus was present inside the body, but there was but the antibody titer or the number of antibody didn't really indicate whether or not a virus infection was prevalent or present inside a patient body, or if the infection is ongoing, or if it was a previous infection that had certain antibodies inside the body. And then we can, after a certain period of time, we can actually identify the antibody rising inside the body, and that titer of antibody will identify that yes, there is a current ongoing infection inside the body, and we can diagnose the virus according to that antibody titer. So seroconversion is actually the point where the antibodies start increasing, the viral load start decreasing, because now the antibody is fighting the virus, and we can directly detect the number of antibodies or the titer of antibodies, and we can conclude or diagnose the current ongoing infection. As in the case of HIV, you can see that the primary infection started, but the virus needed time to multiply or needed time to incubate itself and prepare itself for the replication inside the body. And once it starts replication, you can see that since antibodies are formed at a later stage in the infection, you can see that the virus titer has grown at this particular level, that is week 3 since infection, but the antibody level is really low, so we cannot really um, uh, identify the presence of virus with the help of the antibody titer. But after a certain period of time, that is from 4th to 5th week onwards, you can see that the antibody starts growing, and that's the point that is called as seroconversion, because now you can identify these antibodies and you can actually detect the presence of a viral infection that is ongoing inside the body. And these antibodies can actually neutralize or can decrease the level of viruses that are present inside the body, and the patient may remain asymptomatic for months or even years, especially in case of HIV infection. So there are different phases when it comes to the serologic procedures. The first one is the acute phase. This is the phase where we obtain a sample as soon as the viral etiology is suspected inside a patient. Whereas in the case of covalescent phase, a second sample is obtained after usually 10 to 14 days after the infection. And if the antibody titer is in the convalescent phase, then the sample will have at least 4 times more titer in inside as compared with the sample that was taken during the acute phase. And if the present if the antibody titer is 4 times higher than the antibody titer that was present in the acute phase, then we can actually declare the patient as an infected patient. But if the antibody titer is less than 4 times as compared with the antibody titer that was during the acute phase or during the first sample that we obtained, then we cannot declare the patient as an infected patient, and we have to wait a couple of a couple of days more to identify whether or not an infection is ongoing inside the patient. So if you look here, you can see that during day 0, which is the potential exposure, or which is when we suspect that yes, there might be a presence of virus inside the cell, then the virus usually takes 7 to 14 days to increase its viral load and for us to be able to detect it. Then after day 16, you can see that P24 antigen, which is the HIV specific antigen, will develop, and then there's seroconversion, which is when you can start seeing the symptoms, and which is when the antibody titer rises inside the patients. And by day 28, 95% of the patients that are infected with that particular virus will be positive for the antibody. And by day 90, more than 99.97% of the people will develop HIV antibodies and will test positive by 3 months. But usually in case of usually 14 to 28 days later, you can actually identify the antibody, and the titer of the antibody is 4 times or way more higher as compared to the titer that was taken during the acute phase, and thus we can declare a patient as an infected patient. Then we have the IgM antibody test. In certain viral diseases, there is presence of IgM antibodies against viruses, and this IgM antibody presence can be used to diagnose or identify a current infection inside a patient. The presence of antibody or the antigen IgM to a core antigen indicates the infection of hepatitis B virus. That is, we can actually detect the presence of a type of IgM that is formed specifically in response to the antigen of hepatitis B virus, to the core antigen of hepatitis B virus, and this can help us identify if there is a presence of this IgM antibody. Then this can help us identify whether or not a hepatitis B virus infection is ongoing in a patient. Then we have the heterophil antibody test, also known as monospot. This can be used to diagnose the infectious mononucleases. In the heterophile test, the human serum is reacted with horse or sheep red blood cells. If the heterophile antibody is present, that is, if the patient has been affected with Epstein-Barr virus, the agglutination of red blood cell will occur, and we can actually visualize that agglutination. As you can see here, there's clumping and there's clumping of the antibody with the antigens, and so we can see a heterogeneous solution and agglutination. Whereas in this case, when the sample is negative, there is no antibody present, and thus there is no clumping, and there's a homogeneous solution with no with no agglutination, and so we can detect presence of infections by this method as well. So in this section, we covered the microscopic identification. We compared how we can visualize viruses through light and electron microscopy and as well as through ultraviolet microscopy. Then we saw serologic procedures and explained what IgM antibody test was, how seroconversion can help us identify if an infection is ongoing inside a patient or if the antibodies are present from a previous infection. That's all from this section. Thank you for watching sqadia.com.